Is it possible that the way we measure time is completely different from how time is described in the Bible? What if our understanding of one day, in a 24-hour format, from sunrise to sunset, isn't the same kind of day being described in the 7 days of creation in the Bible? Because when you look closely at the order of Genesis, something stands out. In Genesis 1:14 through 19, the sun, moon, and stars are not created until later in the 4th day of creation. Yet those are the very things we use to measure a day. So how we define one day, before the system that defines a day even exists? There's an old book called The Lost Ages that was published in 1890 as an English translation of an Ethiopian manuscript, originally written in Amharic, a language spoken in Ethiopia. While the exact date of the original text isn't clearly stated, Ethiopia is known for preserving some of the oldest biblical traditions in the world. This book describes each day of creation as an eternity, not a literal day, but a phase, a span of time, far beyond the measurement we use today to calculate days and years. So, what if creation wasn't a week, but a series of ages? If creation happened in longer stages, then life may not have appeared all at once, in 1 week. It may have developed, changed, and even existed in forms before humans ever existed. And when we return to the story of the Garden of Eden, something seems a bit different if we view time in this manner. The serpent is often seen as something outside of creation, and sometimes depicted as a fallen angel, something that entered into the world from the outside. But Genesis 3 verse 1 introduces it differently, that is actually in line with the book of the Lost Ages. It says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made." Meaning, this creature was made along with the other animals. And when we look at the book of the Lost Ages, it adds another detail. It describes that before Adam, there were creatures that existed, and some of them had language like man. Not just instinct, but communication, awareness, and the ability to converse with humanoids. And among these creatures was the serpent. This creature was here on Earth at the beginning stages of the creation of humans. Even also, the serpent race were frightened at the stature of the first human race, because they were much larger in size. If the serpent was created alongside the beasts of the field, then it belongs to the same phase of creation as the animals, as what Genesis describes on the 6th day. The same period where land creatures were formed, where creeping things moved upon the earth, and where man himself was created, which means the serpent was an actual earth-bound creature. And this is where things begin to expand. Because the Bible itself hints that Adam and Eve may not have been alone in the way we often imagine. In Genesis 4, after Cain kills Abel, he is driven out and says in Genesis 4:14, "It shall come to pass that everyone that find me shall slay me." That raises a question: who was he afraid of? And to continue in Genesis 4:17, it says that Cain had a wife. But where did she come from? The text never explains her origin directly. When humans were created in Genesis 1 verse 28, humanity is told to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. To replenish means to fill again, to restore something that was already there. So, what exactly was here before the human race was created? And if there were other forms of human-like life, or other people, then what happened to them? Because when we bring this back to the serpent race, it begins to take on a different meaning. Not as a symbolic figure alone, but as a possible remnant of a race that possibly has died out or have found another habitational environment. Serpent-like creatures have always been connected to water, to hidden places beneath the surface, appearing and disappearing, almost as if they existed between two worlds. These creatures are from the beginning stages of creation of the 6th day era, one that existed before man and remained when man arrived at the end of the 6th stage, in that gap of time. Intelligent, aware, capable of communication, but still classified among the beasts of the field. And this idea doesn't stay isolated to one text. Across different cultures, separated by time and geography, there are repeated accounts of serpent-like beings. In ancient India, The Nagas are described as beings that are part human and part serpent, associated with knowledge and hidden realms. In Mesoamerican tradition, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, is connected to creation, wisdom, and the development of civilization. In ancient Egypt, the serpent appears as a symbol of power, awareness, and sometimes protection. And in Mesopotamian traditions, serpentine figures are often linked with intelligence and the transmission of knowledge. These stories are not identical, but they echo something similar. A pattern, a memory of something that seems to exist between human and creature, something intelligent, something ancient. Even in our world today, the image of the serpent hasn't disappeared. In fact, it still exists in one of the most trusted places, in our own medical field. The symbol used in hospitals and healthcare systems is known as the Rod of Asclepius, a staff with a single serpent wrapped around it. It traces back to ancient Greece, where it was associated with healing and knowledge. And what's interesting is, the serpent here isn't a symbol of evil, but of restoration, awareness, and life. So even today, the serpent remains tied to something deeper, something connected to knowledge and transformation, almost like a memory that never fully faded. So the question becomes, are these just myths, or are they fragments of something that once was? Because when you step back and look at it all together, a different picture begins to form. The serpent may not have been a supernatural being that entered the world, but an earth-born creature created within the same phase as man, an intelligent being that existed before humanity as we know it, and remained just long enough to be part of the story. Maybe the garden wasn't just the beginning of mankind, but the moment where two different forms of life crossed paths. One that was just beginning, and one that was already fading. If you enjoyed this theory, please leave a like and comment. And thank you for listening to Relic Theories.